Well, welcome. I actually had a little bit of a challenge in titling today's presentation, but really the crux of this is going to be risk management, which is obviously a risk to any and all organizations. That's what Brown & Brown does. That's what Dan does for Palermos, is he reduces, avoids, transfers risk whenever possible. And that's what we're going to go through today. So ironically, Brown & Brown is an insurance agent. We place insurance and find you the best coverage and markets and all those things. But my goal or my value to our clients is really to avoid using that insurance. So if it's the risk avoidance and the prevention side of things, I think probably everybody in this room has heard of Palermos, but Dan's role is essentially send people home safe at the end of their shift. And he does all the blocking and tackling for Palermos in that role. And that's why I wanted him here today, is to be able to share with you some of the things that he's done successfully and that he leads the industry in from a blocking and tackling perspective. So I'm Tim, this is Dan. Both of us are, he's more grizzled than I am, veterans, I guess, in the safety field. And he's got cooler toys than I do, but nonetheless. Our goal really for today is to work through some of the both strategic and tactical elements of a risk management program, of a safety program, and what does that look like. So regardless of where anybody's at on the spectrum, whether you don't know what safety is or how to manage safety, or you teach and lead the employees at your organization to be safe and go home safe at the end of the shift like Dan does, our goal is to get you into the green category here, where those green arrows are pointing. We might not be doing it perfectly, but we know what direction that we should be heading now. And the federal penalty part of this, where that ties in, essentially is it's insult to injury. So when we're talking about liability and compliance, it's an uninsurable risk. And at the end of the day, the people are way more important than the fines that the government's going to give to us. But nonetheless, it's an uninsurable risk and something that we want to avoid. The good thing is that there's overlap. The strategies and tactics that we put in place to prevent people from being injured and going home safely to their families also double in preventing federal penalties and citations as a result of not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So really just a takeaway and maybe a call to action: do a really good self-reflection today and analyze where you're at from a blocking and tackling and a strategic perspective, and just ask yourself, what are we doing really well that we're going to continue to do? What haven't we been doing, or what's not on our radar? And what are we going to maybe stop doing that we shouldn't be? What are some bad habits and some things that we've had? So this is an overview. We'll get into it. Inflation Adjustment Act of 2015 essentially changed some things. And a lot of people, this sounds like old news, but it's more relevant because inflation is higher currently. So essentially what happened was there was a catch-up from 1990 to 2016 because federal penalties had not increased in that time frame. With that Inflation Adjustment Act, there was also a tie to the Consumer Pricing Index. So exponentially, every year with a cap annually of 150%, the Consumer Pricing Index is going to cause the OSHA penalties to increase. And they have, obviously, since 2016 even. So as you can see some of the numbers up here, 1990 to 2015, your willful penalties were worth $70,000. In 2016, they jumped to $124,000 and change. And they're currently at, I think, 134 and change. I have a slide here. I'm sorry, 145 and change. So they just continue to go up exponentially with inflation. As costs rise, so will citations and penalties. Again, kind of water under the bridge. If we gave you a prediction of what inflation was going to end up at the end of this year and its impact for this table next year, we'd really just be guessing. But as you can see, in the last 10 years, it's gone up roughly 5% and affected those fines. And it goes up obviously higher in other areas, fuel oil being the greatest example at 68% inflation. So inflation's a bear. And it's going to affect OSHA penalties, and our goal today is to try to avoid those altogether by some of the blocking and tackling things. Even if the OSHA does show up, Dan shared with me a situation where they had a fatality. An employee died, and they had a proper plan in place, had a really good safety management program in place, and when OSHA showed up, they asked for a whole stack of materials and walked away without issuing penalties. So that's really the goal, even if they do show up, is to get out of it with minimal damage and try to triage that. So we'll get into...
Can I throw some color?
Absolutely.
So what do you think, OSHA? Would they give you a bigger ticket for killing somebody or giving them a back injury? What's going to cost more?
It's a trick question. I don't know.
What do you think?
The way you ask it makes me want to say back injury.
Yeah, back injury, clearly. When it total cost of the business, it costs a hell of a lot more to lame somebody for a long period of time than it does to actually kill somebody. Let me ask some other questions here. So, like police officers, they're good things, right? So first off, let's get rid of the cops and do all that stuff. People were commenting on that. Where do cops spend most of their time?
In the car.
Okay, in the car, looking for what?
Donuts? No.
All right, donuts.
Looking for perps, the bad guys.
The bad guys. What are the bad guys doing typically the cops give tickets or citations for? Is it for murder, for rape, you know, the robbery?
No, speeding.
Reckless driving.
It's speeding, right? It's driving through stop signs. Most important? Absolutely, 100%. But you know what? That's not what's killing us. That's not the reason I'm paying all my money in taxes for the police. It's for the big things. When somebody calls OSHA and they say, oh yeah, this supervisor is telling me to do this or do that, OSHA might come into your facility, right? Do an inspection, and try to figure out what's going on. That's not what they give you the citations for. They give you the citations for the things like the cops do for speeding tickets and so forth. It's going out there, it's not labeling containers, it's putting a lock on the wrong thing. So when you really look at the total costs when it comes to OSHA and this other stuff, it's minuscule. What would you rather spend, $100,000 or be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that you're the worst company in the world? Does the dollar amount matter? No. What matters is your company reputation and are employees willing to come and work with you or customers willing to spend money on your products. That's what success means. And when he talks about safety and getting people to go home in the same way that they come to work, what costs more, workers' compensation or health insurance?
Workers' compensation.
For a business?
Well,
No. You mean a monthly cost?
Yeah.
I'm good health insurance.
Health insurance, absolutely. If most companies that are out there, I would say this, you're an insurance dude, I don't know this, it's 5 times the cost typically is what you pay for health insurance versus OSHA, workers' compensation stuff. So where do you want to spend your time? OSHA, or do you want to spend it on the individual and get people to make the right decisions?
yeah.
Is safety something that's natural? Is it something you think about every day? Safety is a pain in the butt. It takes more work and you don't see that I do this and I get hurt. It's a chance, right? Sometimes you screw up, you get wounded, but when you do get hurt bad, then it's something that people pay attention to. So sorry, I just kind of jump in and plop on some stuff. I'll turn it back.
You guys bring the excitement to the room. Appreciate it. That's why we got you here. And Dan led into this beautifully. We have all these risks that we just talked about with the panelists, right? A lot of them are economic, some are attract and retain related. I think a lot of companies are missing the ball or missing the target when they don't address attract and retain as being a potential safety, being a potential impact to attract and retain. The folks that JP talked about from Carthage College, those kids, as good as they are in that program, they don't want to go work at a place that doesn't have machine guards or that's dimly lit and unsafe, where there's a lot of workers being injured constantly. So that millennial, especially younger group, they can screen and filter and determine what kind of workplace they're going to. So we want to have that good reputation in the community. We talked about business costs. Dan mentioned that briefly. You know, a lot of these injuries that we do have happen, not only do the employees go home hurt, but now it stays with you for a 3-year period in your impact, and it impacts your experience modification factors from an insurance cost. So some people think about that or take that into account, others don't. Usually they do, but it's a reactive issue. The goal being essentially the more likely something is to happen and the higher the impact, we want to reduce the risk and avoid the risk altogether. And that's what we want to talk about today. Particularly the last line of this, that quote from Mark Heisel, the area director for Eau Claire there in northern Wisconsin, that OSHA will hold the company responsible for its lack of regard for employee safety and its legal obligation to provide a safe work environment. Would you want a government official saying that about your organization? I don't think anybody here would at all. That's extremely inflammatory. And the worst part about this, I was a part of this case, this was when citations were issued before the informal contest, before the company even had a chance to respond to the citations that were issued. So this was resolved. They still paid money in penalties and had some reputational damage, but it's unquantifiable. And OSHA inflamed the situation well before it was even resolved. So needless to say, we need to have some strategies in place in order to avoid those types of situations from occurring. In that situation, it was 2 amputations, so really severe injuries, really affected the culture of the organization, really was nerve-wracking to the employees coming in because they knew that there was a potential risk for losing limb in this facility. And there's a lot of things blocking and tackling wise that could have been done to prevent that. My personal philosophy, and Dan I think is fairly closely aligned with this, but he could chime in as his approach and philosophy differs. I like to have a blend of like a government approach, like what does OSHA tell us we need to be doing and we need to manage from a compliance perspective, but then really what's the most effective for my organization? Hey, do you want to speak to that? Sure. As far as the effectiveness and custom tailoring this to your company and your culture?
I'm going to step back a little bit to what we just heard in that meeting in there. We talked about one guy who was trying to figure out, get people to retain employees, and what they did is they took them out on the floor and they looked at their reactions, right? Remember that little conversation they had? How do you do that for your company when it comes to safety? And I challenge you on this. So just go on, you have a daily production meeting or you have some daily meeting. Is safety a part of that? Is that the first thing you talk about every time? Or is the first thing that matters is what the productivity is going out the door? Oh, do I have any quality issues? Oh, did anybody get hurt? So to me, it's more of a culture thing than it is having rules and regulations and all this stuff that's out there. Can you do things that are unsafe and get hurt? Anybody ever rode a motorcycle? Did you ever drive a car before? And you know what? You made it. And there's a lot of dangerous things that are out there, but what you did is you thought about what are the issues that could happen and you put some plan in place. My favorite thing is, and I talk about many times, is I have a bolt that's sitting here, right? And I can't get this bolt off. So what do? Is I put a wrench on it and I crank on it really hard and it doesn't work. I'm at home, I gotta get the darn thing fixed. I gotta worry about the kids or grandkids or whatever it happens to be. How am I gonna get that off? I'm gonna put a pipe on it probably, right? To get some more leverage. Are you supposed to do that? Would a safety guy freak out if you put a pipe on it? You're damn right, because it could break. Well, why don't we ask ourselves, what would happen if it would break? So if I'm putting a 10-foot pipe on this thing, I could ask myself, that wrench is gonna break right now. If it flies someplace, where's it gonna hit? If that wrench breaks right now, where am I going to fall down and develop a plan? So everything doesn't have to be pillows and rainbows that are out there. You just need to have a plan as what happens if something goes wrong. And that's true with the entire business model, right? Safety's no different. That help?
Yeah, through that part? And really the focus there and the goal is to put this plan in place. To have a plan if something happens at your organization, or better yet, what to do to prevent injuries and also get the work done. Safety being front of mind, I think, is absolutely critical. And I think there's a delicate balance that needs to be struck at your individual location and company, even locations within the company, based on different cultural receptiveness to safety, historical performance, some of those things. But overall, it's a cycle. It's just something that has to continually be repeated. As employees turn over, as new processes and machinery are introduced into your environment, a lot of automation creates a lot of new training and management of change processes out there. So really what we want to try to do is focus in on, do we have some basic work rules and policies? Have we identified what some of the risks are? Have we created a plan and then communicated what that plan is to the employees that are affected by it? And then are we continuing to monitor and identify what some additional risks are that maybe we missed at the first hazard assessment cycle? And then if we do discover any violations, issues, corrective actions, it's a continuous cycle. We just continue to repeat ourselves in this way. If you're really advanced, there's formal systems. Giant organizations have industry-leading programs, formal safety management systems that can be put into effect. I would say that a lot of that is window dressing. Dan, would you tend to agree?
I would too. There's some value in all of that, but there's a lot of stuff that's out there too that maybe not be so value added that's out there, but it provides you a system to follow and make sure that you're doing things like a safety part of your normal everyday operations. That's in a nutshell.
Gives us a structure.
ISO 9000, you guys are familiar with that too? Everybody seems to. It's kind of the same system. Plan, Do, Check, Act is in all of those different systems that are out there. The same thing. It's just, what are you going to do? Tell me what you're going to do it. Let's check it out. Did it work? Nope. Let's go fix it and improve it and move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. As far as tactical safety and some of the things that you're going to need to do from a blocking and tackling perspective every single day, and this is, I think, where Dan thrives. There are daily disciplines, just like we have to brush our teeth, we have to exercise, we have to cook food. There's things that we do every single day to sustain ourselves and to keep healthy and well. It's no different in our safety program. What we're doing and focusing on is essentially, to Dan's point, that cycle, the daily identification of hazards and development of procedures to keep people safe, to send them home at the end of their shift. And that looks different. There's different tools in the toolbox depending on what type of machinery, what type of equipment you have, what's already in place, what you might need to develop or enhance. Return to work programs, there's a blend of proactive and reactive measures that come into play. Training and communication, I kind of overlap those or integrate those one into the other. Oftentimes training is ineffective. OSHA tells us that we have to have effective training. Well, what does that mean? It's a performance standard. Does everybody learn differently? Yeah, the people that are in this room right now are going to take something different away from this training based on what you heard and what resonated with you or didn't. And in order for, I think, a lot of training to be effective, it needs to be repeated. It needs to be hands-on. We need to engage folks in whatever the task is. So Dan mentioned the removal of the bolt. Do we have a policy in place, and have we communicated what type of wrench? Have we provided the right type of wrench? And have we gone through training on how to use it appropriately?
And I'd just like to say, I'm not at all suggesting we don't do what he's talking about right now, but it's got to be twofold. Everything is not always perfect, and you've still got to figure out how to work through that.
Correct.
A couple more comments, if I could, on this. There's a gentleman by the name of E. Scott Keller I spent with. He was a behavioral psychologist from Virginia Tech. Pretty incredible guy. He always talked about this. I don't know, we got kids. You want your kids to go through sex training or sex education? The same thing's true for safety, right? We don't want to tell everybody every single time how to do A, B, and C. We want to give them the tools for them to be able to make their own decisions. Now, that's not always the case, but you have to, right? You just got to get people in that whole mindset. That is the key. Who's got the answers? They do. Not me, not management. The people on the floor, they're doing the job every day. You just got to figure out how to pull it out, give them a platform where you can reward them when they do it.
Who develops the training at Palermos? The content of training.
Yes. Everybody.
Everybody.
That's the best way to put it on that. The first thing is talking with the people who are actually doing the work. We have individual trainers that are out there. We get everybody engaged with that.
And like you said, that's the most effective is when everybody has feedback, not me dictating what needs to be in training.
And to me, the most important thing about training, about documents, is the damn document's a great thing, right? I got this little document here. It doesn't mean a damn thing unless you go out there and find out if people are really doing it. So you can't just train somebody, oh, I'm all done. What's more important is to go back there and try to do follow-up with them. And the follow-up, I could talk for a long time, right? Okay.
You're leading us in.
Oh, I'm leading it in.
You're
So
putting the ball in the
kind of
tee.
going through that. So when you give somebody feedback, when you're trying to go out there and you're trying to change a behavior, right? You need to have an antecedent, you need to have an activator. You need to have a plan to try to get that behavior heard by somebody. So an activator and antecedent, what's that mean? How do you teach somebody what they're supposed to do? Is it a meeting? Is it an SOP that you have written out there? Is it a video that's showing exactly what needs to do because you have multiple languages in there? I don't know, but you need to figure out a plan for that. Next thing that's most important about changing behavior is to define what that consequence is. What are you going to do when somebody does the behavior or doesn't do the behavior? You should have a plan for trying to figure out how to make it positive, soon, and certain. How do you give somebody a pat in the back instead of kicking the ass? Right? That's what we should be doing as leaders, is trying to reward people for doing something wrong. It needs to be soon. It can't be they did this a week ago and you come back and tell about it now because they're screwed up. And it needs to be certain. If Tina or Joe is seeing me do that, I know I'm going to get feedback. If they don't do that, they're not going to do it again in the future.
And this, I'm gonna hit the pause button on you because I want you to highlight at the end,
Okay.
your awareness program and the highlight of good things, not just safety alerts for problems that exist. And that's one of the biggest features that I like about that. So I'm gonna come back to that and revisit it. We'll unpause you in a second here. As far as audits and observations, really again, another blocking and tackling thing to objectively evaluate what are our employees doing out there on the front line. Are they following what they learned in training? If not, why not? Do they not have the right tools? Did they try to do something to improve their speed or improve the quality and take a safety shortcut? There's a lot of different reasons that people do what they do. But as a lot of the panelists discussed, a proper onboarding and training and evaluation check-in period is a component of attract and retain as well. A lot of employees want to know and understand that the company they're working for is going to train them and give them the tools and equipment that they need and check on them periodically. So that's an element of attract and retain. And then there's continuous improvement. If we find deficiencies, if we find problems, if we see that somebody's not doing what we asked them to do during training, we need to figure out why not and come up with a plan to correct it. Usually it's a progressive approach. If it is an employee that's just flagrantly deciding not to cooperate, and I would say that's probably few and far between. There are usually coaching and opportunities to be able to work with that employee and get better going forward. So really what we want you to chew on is how effective is your safety program? Is it just lipstick on a pig, right? Is it just lip service, something that we say and tout? Or I've heard Dan mention this, we need to talk about safety first in the meeting. Some companies that I've experienced and I've worked with say safety first or talk about safety first, and then it goes away after the meeting. Right? It's an advertisement, it's a marketing topic, not an actual effective safety program. So self-evaluate, ask yourself really, how is your safety program? Just very briefly, I want to go into this, and then like I said, I want to hit on Dan's program here and some of the leading edge stuff that he's working on and doing. As we mentioned at the very beginning, OSHA penalties are just insult to injury. It's water under the bridge, but it is costly. And some of the things that we can do.
How much does insurance pay for that?
Zero.
Oh.
No coverage. No coverage for federal penalties. Yeah. And what's the reputational damage? We don't know. Right? When OSHA slanders us in the news, right? So if we do have any of these situations, what's the best time to prepare for that situation? When OSHA shows up?
Well before they arrive.
Yes. plan, drill, prepare, go through this as a realistic scenario. It is a risk to your organization, just like a fire or an active shooter or a chemical spill or whatever the situation might be. It's not that high of an emergency, but if people don't know how to handle it and they don't know what to do, they're going to open the door and say, yeah, go ahead and look at all the machines that you need to look at and come let me know when you're done what you found. Okay, that's not the best way to handle an OSHA inspection. If we don't drill, prepare, train for that situation, we're going to have some pretty significant damage. There's a lot of little elements to this, but basically federal inspectors say that they're on site to help, and I'm cynical about that. I do believe there's a role for education and assistance from OSHA, but we do run into a lot of situations where OSHA compliance officers come in and say, you know, I'm here to help, and try to get people to let down their guard and then divulge more information than they should to a federal officer. Okay, so, or lie to a federal officer, which is an extreme problem if employees are interviewed and they're lying about their work practices or the level of training that they have. So I think the triage and the preparation for an OSHA inspection should be a risk that we manage proactively, not wait until OSHA shows up and then respond or react to it.
Can I make some quick comments on that? So
Absolutely.
OSHA, like going out there, how does OSHA come into your plant? It's going to be a random inspection. If you're in a severe violator enforcement program, they lower the hat and put a smaller group of people, or you're in a big hazardous, or the employee calls up, or if you're in Milwaukee, which is much different than the rest of the United States, you call 911, hey, I got somebody who's got a big injury. OSHA finds out about that too. Does anybody here had cops show up at their door? I have, multiple times. So the first thing you do, you call 911, you got a cop there, and they want to say they want to come and investigate it. And I'm not going to get into the business, but I told the cop, you're not coming in here right now, because I'll be damned if I'm letting you in that room, because you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're going to hurt yourself. I'm an emergency person. Sir, if you want to relax right now and sit down, I will happily explain to you how to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be contacting your supervisor, and you will leave and get a warrant before I'm allowing you in your facility. Your safety is more important than what you're trying to do right now. So be aware that it's not just OSHA who comes in when that happens. Oh, by the way, is there somebody else we got to be worrying about? The reporters. Again, money isn't the big deal. The big deal is how you are being branded, I'll say, by the media if they come in and they're doing something.
Absolutely. And to that point too, it becomes a game of telephone. I've had situations where a police officer came in with the emergency responders after an employee got his hand crushed between two parts that were moving, and he called, one of the police officers responding called OSHA and said that it was a degloving, and OSHA was there the next morning. So it's a little game of telephone. They call it the referral process. In that situation, it went horribly, and the compliance officer came there assuming that it was much worse than it actually was. So nonetheless, again, OSHA stuff is kind of a secondary response to this. It's insult to the injury. What I really wanted to focus in on, and because we're talking about what's next, what's on the horizon. That's the whole point of this meeting. Safety alert programs, I think in my experience, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of manufacturing facilities, and I think that Dan does this better than 95% of the places that I've been in and seen do this. And it's called a safety alert program. And really what it is, it's a marketing, visibility, and a way to block and tackle and get things corrected quickly, and to make sure that it either doesn't happen again or the severity doesn't get worse. It doesn't get out of hand. So it's a mechanism, it's a tool in Dan's toolbox, and I'd like for him to highlight the safety alert program and really what that entails, and how that's effective at Palermos.
Go ahead. Keep going. Go to show a safety alert. The actual, I think there's one in there, right?
It's not responding to me. There's one in the actual form.
All right, so that's kind of a safety alert, okay? So I'm just going to talk through this. So my goal is to get every employee that we have inside of the plant If they have pain, I didn't say they had cuts, I didn't say they have a broken finger, they have pain. If I bend over and I pick up a pencil, do I have pain? And if I hurt my back, is that a painful thing? Could be. But if a person hurts their back, that's what they would report. The supervisor is not complicated. They just write down what it is that actually happened, what it is they're going to do to provide to prevent it. And oh, by the way, especially with the workforce becoming extremely diverse, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A picture of the person in the position that they were in at the time of injury, and we communicate that with every person inside of the plant every single day. We got about 750 people at this plant. We do about 30 of them a week. So there's about 5 or so that happen every day. In many other companies, I've had similar things happen, so it isn't just unique within Palermos. So we do that for pain. We also do it for good things. If we did something to try to prevent an injury or something like that, we would write that down. If we have property damage, a forklift runs into a wall, puts a hole in the wall, we put that down. And we take this document right here, and that is kind of sent through one of our systems we have. We use Red Zone. If any of you are familiar with Red Zones, it's a system that you use to monitor your quality and your production processes within your facility at all stages within it. So we create this document within that Red Zone, then it gets sent to safety people. I have one other person that works with me. We tweak it to kind of make it be acceptable to send out to the public. In other words, I don't write inside of a thing that a person did something that was completely unacceptable and make that public and share it with everybody. I'll tweak it and make it look a little bit better. A person did not follow the practices that they were taught, and they stuck their finger in the machine and cut their finger off. I'm just making that up. We haven't had that happen. But something like that. And then this gets sent to every person inside of the plant. This is posted on TVs every single day. There's hard copies that are posted out there, and we review this at every single production meeting on every shift, and we talk through it. Then we take all of this data that's in this report, and we use that to drill down and try to figure out where should we be spending our time, where should we be making investments from a capital perspective to try to reduce the number of injuries that are out there. Oh, by the way, when the person goes to the doctor and the doctor says, they tell the doctor, oh yeah, I was lifting 250 pounds up and 15 times a second and all that crazy stuff. And I just take the safety alert and I give it to the employee, and they take that with them to the doctor, so the doctor knows really exactly what happened and we are on the same page. There's no argument between the employee what happened. They have an employee statement that they are also filling out to make sure that this is all accurate. This doesn't become a great big 5 type system where we're putting in the DMAIC process and figuring out everything. It's fast, it's quick, and it drives conversation. And that's what I believe makes things work.
Are there any things that you would avoid putting in these alerts? You said some sensitive
pictures,
information.
Yep. I think, is there another slide for that too? There's some kind of thing. So it's the same day, we do it before the end of the shift. Again, we had injury, near misses, property damage, good things are also up. You had a question?
Yeah, it's all good things. So, which is really, I love that concept. So how do you take an injury, and just from a practical standpoint, how do you fill out that sheet? How do you take a picture? So let's say you take the back injury. Somebody's doing good thing. What's an example of like a good thing for back injury that you do? Do you take a picture?
So like the example that I have right here, this is somebody taking, it's called safety sorbent. Yeah. It's used in the food industry, and then if the floor gets a little bit slippery, you sprinkle it down. We would show an example of that. If a person, let's think the person had a back injury. They're trying to lift up something that weighs 100 pounds, and what they said is, I can't do that. I need 3 other people to help me. Maybe I'd have a picture of them lifting up to 300 people and doing that. Critical. Do not ever show a person's face or allow people to know who it is that's in the safety alert, or it's going to stop. The other thing that's going to happen, especially if it's a CEO or it's a VP, if they comment back to whoever it is that wrote this and say, what the hell are you doing, blah, 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 it's done. It'll never happen again. If they call up that person and say, hey, good job, thanks for doing that safety alert, that's exactly what to do, now we keep going. So that lends to the question, is more safety alerts good or bad? It's good. So the more we hear about stuff, the better off we are. And people struggle with that, right? Well, if it's a safety alert, then that means that no, it means people are engaged. You're measuring engagement, not issues.
It's not always for an injury either.
Correct.
It's a lot of it is leading indicators that we're using to identify what could cause an injury.
Absolutely.
So we're getting ahead of we're communicating to get ahead of the injury, essentially.
I think I hit this part already.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that one common sense thing? I think that's something if I can get people to. Is there such a thing as common sense?
Gosh, I hope so.
Okay, so like I'm a safety dude, right? So I do a lot of crazy things. So I've raced motocross bikes, and I got a Sherp, and I got all this stuff. So when you jump your dirt bike across and the front end comes up, how do you stop the front end from coming up? It's common sense.
Tap the brake, re-brake.
Oh, everybody knew that, right?
No.
No.
And, well, then the opposite. If the front end's going down, what do you do?
Front brake.
No, you give it gas. You give it gas, and it'll come up. And I had a 1935 Model A John Deere tractor. You know those ones, the 2-cylinder ones? The ones that go pop, pop like a Harley when they drive? How do you start them? Right, you turn on the gas, right? You make sure that it's in neutral. You open the petcocks, you grab a hold of the flywheel, you let it go, let go of it so it doesn't kill you, shut the petcocks, and you're off and running. Common sense. A baby, for instance, common sense. If you have a baby that's out there, right, and you're in China, where is that baby at? In the car. Where do you put the baby? Everybody knows it's definitely with the mom, so that baby can be fed. It's common sense. There's no such thing as common sense. Everybody's got a different background. Our job as leaders is to pull out all that common sense for everybody, and we all share it with everyone, and we grow as a team. That's what we should be doing. Silence, I don't know if that's good or bad.
We're taking it all in.
And I get
You're an effective
fired up
speaker.
too, so. What else you got? Is that all at once?
Yeah, that's the main one that I wanted to highlight. We're not quite done, but really the goal is to do that quickly, that process.
And the cautious thing, and what I was trying to say too, is this is just bringing back some more. Not only am I trying to get out there that's a public document, but this can become discoverable. So especially if we got something that's bad, right, we're going to get sued because we blew something up or whatever that's out there. You need to be cautious with that. So sometimes less words is good, but we're just trying to get that information out to our people. We're not trying to give every single detail that's out there that we would use in a lawsuit or anything else that's out there.
And then
The one bullet that was up there, the report before the end of your shift,
Yes.
you know, without like learning the importance of that so that it is something that occurred at work. I mean, like I had a slip and fall at my office and I hit my arm into a stall wall because the paper dispensers were here and the sink was here and the door entrance was here.
Yep.
Right? So that was where I said maybe move the paper towel dispensers after it. But a coworker of mine said, you need to report that. And I'm like, never in my life, because I'm clumsy, would I report that. He's like, what if you wake up tomorrow and you can't move, right? Because you hit your arm so hard because of this at work. So like that was the part that I guess resonated with me is like the importance of that.
And I would add to
Telling
that,
your employees
like
that.
your friend said to you, okay, what happens if you have pain later? Well, let's just pretend this is a Friday night, right? You're going to go out and get liquored up with your girlfriends or your friends or whoever it happens to be.
Yeah.
You're drunk all stinking weekend and you're feeling good. You wake up on Monday, oh! You call up your supervisor and say, hey man, I hurt myself on Friday in the bathroom. I don't know if the insurance company would probably think that that's something that's probably compensable, but I would think originally that there's probably some funny business going on.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to teach people too with that whole thing.
Right.
the other part of that to add is the corrective action. You had a really good suggestion for making that situation safer for you and everybody else.
Yeah.
That wouldn't get captured if you didn't report it.
Right, and we're in a new building, and it happened, they moved
Yeah.
because.
That's great.
And that was, because I didn't just go back to my desk and say, Elaine, you're clumsy.
Yeah.
Like, this kind of stuff happens to you all the time.
Yep, it's perfect. I really like the trending and tracking stuff that you guys do with this. So how many did you say, 20 a week?
5 a day.
No, yeah, probably about 30 a week is about our average, yeah.
Okay.
So I think in the last 4 years, I think I have 5,000 different ones that are done or something in our database. And don't build an Excel, but that's all that I had. That's what I did. So it's very slow and very cumbersome. But we can say who are doing the safety alerts. Again, people are getting a pat on the back when they're doing a lot of them. I'll give them $100 or something. I'll figure out some way to if they're comfortable with this, right? So he's inside, we're all supervisors together. I would talk to him first. Do you mind if I recognize you in front of everybody? And then I'd give him $100 or something like that, and then everybody gets motivated. But if he happens to be the guy that doesn't like attention in front of a group, I would never give that to him, ever. Because if I do that, he'll never do it for me again. Be cautious of that.
Well, he would still take the $100, so.
Yeah. But I've had some people really get bummed about. I mean, there's some people that just do not like recognition. They don't. And we're all different.
So again, call to action, I think from my perspective and the reason that I have Dan here, safety at the end of the day, avoiding penalties, sending people home safe, whatever the end goal and your objective is for your organization, it's a people business. We have to work with people individually, as Dan just mentioned, but we also have to have some structure in place corporately. So it's a constant juggling act, it's a constant blend. I already gave you some of the structure, some of the reasons why we have to do certain things. Sometimes OSHA says we have to do it. The insurance carrier is going to require it. Whatever the case may be. My mom said I can't handle a V8, right? Whatever it is. You know, we have to be sure we're doing those things or starting those things that we're not doing from a structural perspective. Stop the things that we're doing that we shouldn't be, and continuing. So one of my recommendations and encouragements is to start doing those safety alerts for your organization. I really like that. I think Dan would testify that has been super effective part of his safety program and communication. But there's other ideas out there. How many of you do safety surveys for your employees? Anyone? Do you get feedback about what's safe and what's not safe? Do we have the right tools for the job? Do we have the right personal protective equipment? Is the housekeeping and sanitation in the facility adequate? Because my perspective when I walk through and do an audit might be, yes, but the employees, the ones that you need to retain, don't have that same perspective. And it gives us action items. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox from a safety management perspective that we can use. The safety alerts are one of them, safety perception surveys another, but you can constantly be going through and tweaking and improving your program by asking yourself and being honest with yourself about how well you're doing and where we have opportunities to improve, just like any of the other topics that we focused on today.
I really thought this was fantastic. Early on, you said the safety part of your culture, or do you have to talk about productivity first, and safety just kind of comes up and then it's gone. What, Tim, in your experience, what percentage of companies make it like their top priority, middle priority, and priority throughout the organization, versus what percent give it lip service and move on?
Depends on the size of the organization, depends on the culture of the organization. Do the executives care about it? Does the board care about it? I would say that's a hard thing to quantify. I would say probably more than 50% of companies say that safety is important to them, but when you look at the blocking and tackling and some of the effectiveness, it's really truly not. It's just lip service. So it's like, any topic, like, yeah, I care. Well, do you? What are you doing to show that you care and are going to drive the results? What actions are in place? And as far as priority, ranking safety first. A lot of people say safety first. That's also a balance. We should talk about it first. It should be front of mind in all of our meetings. But does safety make the company money? Productivity is an element, right? Quality is an element. If all we care about is getting it done safely, we're not going to get very many things out the door, because we're going to be so cautious and overcautious that we're going to be slow in our production. Right? Any feedback about that as far as a priority?
I will not safety a company out of business.
Sorry?
And I will not safety a company out of business. but I will not allow a company to not make it something that's important. And what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of times people jump to, well, just got to give me a gold toilet and then I won't have any issues anymore, or something like that, right? Well, I think that we can go to war and some people don't get shot. There's ways that that happens. I need to challenge you to figure out a way, given what we have today, so you go home in the same condition you arrived. And oh, by the way, whatever that thing is, if you can relate it to something that they're doing at home with their family, it clicks. And I really talk about that. Everything that I talk about with safety is not just because of the company, it's as you as an individual. I'll challenge all of you. Do you guys mow your lawn? Or have you had mowed your lawn?
Yeah.
Do you teach your kids how not to wear safety glasses when you do it? Do you teach your kids not to wear hearing protection? Do you teach them to wear flip-flops? Do you think about that when you're doing stuff like that? It's a thought more than an expense. And if we spend more time in changing people's thoughts versus doing investments, I think that you're going to be, you have to do both at the same time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, you know, not to spend any money on that, but there's a balance there. And I think that there's companies that are Fortune 100 companies. Did anybody hear about that BP thing? There was a little oil leak or something that happened. How many billions of dollars did that cost? How many people went to jail?
It cost the CEO his job.
I think that there was 12 people that are in federal prison for that.
Oh, really?
Did you know that they were celebrating not having a recordable injury for a year on the day that that happened?
Come on.
Seriously?
Wow.
Yes, very seriously.
Wow.
Safety can be window dressing. It doesn't mean a damn thing unless you can go out and talk to somebody on the floor and ask them the question, if this happens, what would you do? And you know who needs to do that? The leader of that business.
Right, that's exactly right.
If I can get, I got that CEO, I got the VP of Ops, I don't care who it is. I'll get one of them out there, and I'm not going to be seen with them either. That's just a private conversation where we're having coffee. Dude, I need you to go out and ask Timmy about whatever, and you just deal with it.
Is Giacomo out there?
Pardon?
Is Giacomo out there?
So Giacomo is out there, but Giacomo is not a guy that's engaged with day-to-day production operations. Now, Angelo, yes, he would be one of them that's out there, and he's not even close to that, but there's others within the business that are. But if Giacomo or Angelo, by the way, those are owners of the, maybe you know what the Fluke, because everybody does, but they're not the people that are there 24/7. I don't, respectfully to them, they're not the ones that matter to me. The people that are running the show do.
Yeah, yeah. No, that.
So,
The only other metric or thing that I would add to that question is, what are your key performance indicators?
yes.
And supervisors, managers, are they all held accountable in a performance review process for those KPIs?
Where it matters, yeah.
Is safety a KPI of your organization? And are the supervisors accountable, not just a pencil whipping in the performance review annually, oh yeah, he's safe, he requires his employees to, wear PPE when they're out on the shop floor. No, are 100% of your department employees at the safety trainings that we conduct? Or is it only 50% because you got half of them out on the shop floor still pumping parts out instead of being at the safety training that they need to be at? So what you're measuring as an organization, I think, is critical as well. And are you holding the people that are doing the day-to-day accountable for corrective actions, for the participation in that safety program proactively?
I have to bring this up. So a lot of times, people have performance review. Well, I got to give them, let's say it's a 4 scale. Well, they've got to get a 3 or a 4 and they're not going to get any raise out there. All right, don't sit there and fight with them about that. How about we just sit in a room, then let's rank them. Let's take all of our people and rank them. Who's got the best safety performance? Man, you want to talk about some conversations right now. Is it based on injuries? Is it based on the number of safety alerts that they do? Is it the number of safety topics that they have? I don't know. Let them come up with all of that stuff, right? It doesn't take a safety person to do that.
Sure. You just stir the pot.
Yeah.
That's why he drives motocross.
Does anybody have any other questions, whether it's related to what we talked about or just how to implement safety effectively? that we didn't address. We're going to be here for a few minutes afterwards as well to talk about that and answer questions, but it is case by case. It is company by company. Just as, the panelists had different headwinds as they described it, different challenges with their organizations and their niche operations, you're going to have different levels of automation and different, quality and experience of employees depending on where you're located, and you just have to custom tailor your program to your company and your locations.
Dan, when did you implement the safety alert system?
How many years ago? I don't remember. I think I started it at Filmity Paper, and then I did it at Johnson Controls. I think I might have even started at GE. It's been a while.
So in those different experiences, what were some unexpected end results that came from it?
CEOs getting pissed off because they didn't like what was written in the safety alert, and then going back and saying something that individual and destroying the program and having no building again.
Wow.
CEOs are high-level people. That's the biggest challenge.
Would you encourage the CEO to be a part of that program before it gets off the ground?
I would not introduce a program unless I had commitment from that CEO that he will not do that. He can come chew my ass out. There's no problem with that. You come chew me out, put me in a room, and you yell at me, I'll deal with it. But if you go out there and you beat up one of our people inside this plant, the system is going to fail. I have learned that. That's probably the biggest learning that I've had.
Interesting.
Good feedback.
You got to have the leader on board, right? And this is a safety thing, and it's teaching safety people how to do that, but the safety person isn't the person with the answers. They're just trying to push people in the direction that they need to go and get them to think a little bit differently. That's what a successful safety person is. I can give you 10,000 stupid checklists. That doesn't mean a damn thing in my mind. They help. I'm not saying that. But it's got to be attitude. It's in your head.
Right. Commitment.
And if people don't care, that's fine. We can find another place for you to fit in. It certainly isn't here. I'm not going to put you in a position where you're going to hurt somebody. I've had 2 people die in my watch. I'm not having that happen yet. And I'm back to that death thing. It just pisses me off that they pay $250,000 for somebody dying at work, and you can spend millions of dollars for somebody with a soft tissue shoulder type back injury. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Well, thank you everyone for your time and the attendance. We appreciate it.
All right.